It is Thursday and John Giles is in studio. We're looking back on the World Cup. We're going to go through some of the big stories. We're going to name the best player, the best goal, the biggest disappointment, the worst manager, the best manager. And John, I guess there's no question about the best team. Did the best team win this World Cup?
Oh, I think so, Nathan, yeah. They got better as the Cup went along, I think, as the tournament went along. And in the end, they actually played very well in the semi-final and the final. And that was down a lot, I think, to my pal Pogba, who played like a real pro in the semi. And I think we had a session beforehand, and my concern was, does he go back to be the social media guy, or is he going to be the player he was in the semi-final? And lucky for France, he turned out to be the player he was in the semi-final and played really well. So definitely France, I would say, overall, deserved to win it.
We're live on all our social channels as well, so if you want to leave a comment on facebook.com/offtheball, on Periscope or on YouTube, we will put it to John over the next half an hour or so. So let's talk Pogba first, and what changed from the early rounds of the tournament and even from the last couple of years, where I know you've been frustrated with the lack of discipline, with his performances, and maybe part of that was that he's not the type of player that Jose Mourinho hyped him up to be. What was the difference in terms of his discipline and positional sense in those last two games to what we've seen at United over the last couple of years?
I think for the semi-final, I don't know who got to him, whether it was Deschamps or himself. He decided that he was going to be a professional footballer, not a social media star. In other words, he's going to be a pro. He's going to go out and play like a pro, not dancing around, giving passes that look spectacular that weren't on, doing all sorts of tricks rather than getting the business done. Semi-final, he was very good. He was getting back at it. He played like a player should play, and he has the ability to do it. So it's definitely a mental thing with him. I think the social media, it definitely got to him somewhere along the line. Going to be a social media star, going to have the haircut, going to have all that, and that took over and he made that more important than actually being a player. For whatever reason, I don't know. Certainly in the semi-final he was a player, and in the final he was a player.
So and that side of it needs to be the social media side, as you describe it. Yeah. That needs to be the final 5%, not the first 5%
exactly.
When you go onto the pitch.
In fact, he should be even less than 5%.
Right.
Because he will get more credit for being a real player than he will be for being a social media star. Genuine admiration and respect. And if you look at the papers this morning, Nathan, Mourinho actually, to be fair to Mourinho's a football guy. He said whatever made him do what he did in the semi-final and the final, that's what I want him to do. In other words, be a pro. Right now, to go back to Mourinho, I don't think Mourinho handled Pogba very well last year. I think Deschamps did. I think his way of trying to get him to play the way he played in the semi-final and final was to humiliate him, and I think that made him worse. So what he's got to do, learn Mourinho, is whatever happened in France, whether it be Deschamps, he's got to get him privately and say, okay, what do you want to do? How can I help you to get him on side to do what he did in those particular matches?
Well, that's the big question now, that and the big problem in some ways that Mourinho is going to face, because we've seen a different Paul Pogba. He can do this. He can do it in the biggest of games. Yeah. And if he doesn't start the season playing like that for Manchester United, the question will be asked of Mourinho, well, what's Mourinho's problem that he can't get the best out of him? Because there were moments. There was the pass for Mbappe with the outside of his boot that was brilliant. It was the right ball at the right time. Yeah. But he seemed to try balls like that at Manchester United when it wasn't the right ball at the right time. Is it a simpler message?
Well, it's the social media stuff. Social media, to me, is you're showing off rather than being effective, right? So I think what happened to him with Manchester United, I think Mourinho should have got a hold of him privately. I don't think Mourinho can do this, but I think he should have got a hold of him privately. And indeed, with any problem with a player, Nathan, I've never seen it work where you humiliated a player publicly and he played for you. Get him on his side, and nobody knows what Mourinho is saying to Pogba. He could be giving him the biggest telling off you ever seen. Like, I don't want you to do this. I want you to cut out. I want you to be a pro. Whatever way he's going to do it. But it's definitely on a one-to-one. Now, what Mourinho did against Spurs, remember, the first time he started to fall out with Pogba, he took him off at half-time, humiliated him, left him out for a few matches. So he was trying the hard way to get the best out of it, and he certainly didn't. Right now, Deschamps I think Deschamps said, look, no good doing that. Wanted to be a real player, but it was between him. Didn't humiliate him. So there's a big difference between telling somebody on the quiet and humiliating him. So I think Mourinho, for the right reasons, which was to get him to play in the way he should be playing, went about it in the wrong way. So he upset, whatever confidence Pogba had was gone. Right, so whatever happened to him, I don't know what happened to him before the semi-final or during the World Cup, or particularly semi-final, but something got to this guy that whether I'd say Deschamps would have a big influence because he's the manager, and maybe said, look, you've got to do it. If you don't do it, you'll be out of the team. This is what you do. You've got to be a pro. Don't care about social media. Don't care about your haircut, the dance or everything goes with it. We want you to play football.
And maybe Didier Deschamps, more than any other manager in world football, understands that role better because he had to sit in a French team where he was described as a water carrier, where there are these geniuses around him. And I'm sure he felt he had more talent than he was given credit for. But he had to sit and do the boring things all the time.
Well, he did what was professional and what was needed at the time. You see, I'd say that a lot of players had a lot of respect. Where he got the water carrier from was actually from
Cantona.
Cantona. Do you know what I mean? Now, Cantona was a bit of a Pogba himself. You know what I mean? He'd have no respect for Deschamps because he wasn't spectacular. But he did the job and he was a real pro. So he'd want Pogba to be a real pro with more ability than he had. Other players had more ability than Deschamps, but he did his job. He did what he gave the team whatever he had. That's all you can ask of any player. And now Deschamps would know that Pogba wasn't doing that. Pogba was doing it for his own reasons, for the social media and being a star and showing off and all the various things he did. He was doing anything but being a pro. So I think Deschamps, as you said, would know what a pro is all about. Do what you're best for the team and do it in an honest way. Now, for whatever reason, I don't know whether it's Deschamps or any other influence, he did do it, particularly in the semi-final. Early on in the competition, he didn't do it so well. Semi-final and final, he did really well. So he showed. Now Mourinho has a problem with him because people are saying now they're going to blame Mourinho for it, right? Rather than Pogba, because I think Mourinho handled it. So when he gets him back, what's he going to say to Pogba? Sorry for what I said to you. I realise I don't know what he's going to say, but he has a job to do with Pogba, to get Pogba, because he's in the paper this morning, Mourinho, saying, well, that's the way I want to play for Manchester United. But that's the problem. He has the problem now with Pogba.
Before we move on then to some of the awards for this World Cup, on the game itself, were they somewhat fortunate with the own goal, with the penalty award? Because a week ago we sat here and said if France get parity in midfield, they should win this because of the talent they have around the pitch. It wasn't one of Kante's better days. He ended up being substituted off. And by and large, certainly for the first 20 minutes or so, Croatia started that game brilliantly. So was there a touch of fortune over the 90 minutes where France the better team?
Yeah, I think whatever breaks they were going, France got them. That would be my take. I thought Croatia started well, as you say. France weren't starting well. Then they got the penalty. Was it the penalty first one?
The own goal was the first one.
Actually, I didn't think it was a free kick in the lead up to the first goal. I thought, well, all the players are doing it now. Griezmann looked for it and got it.
Without getting into 20 minutes on VAR, should they change it so that, because VAR can't look at free kicks, it can only look at goal scoring changes?
Well, like on the VAR, I would give the VAR all the responsibility and all the power to do it. You see, what's happened over the years, Nathan, they don't like to take the power away from the referees. And the referees don't like the power to be taken away from them. I think it should be taken away from them, right? Why not? Okay, because what happened with the referees, they didn't want to be shown up in any way, right? Nobody's going to show them up. If they'd taken that thing with Griezmann and gone to VAR, there's a good chance they would have said, no, he did dive there, or he did take a knock. Why should it be left to the referee to do that?
And also with the handball, one of the criticisms of the referee was he looked at it a couple of times, went to walk away, and then went back to have a third look, which was almost seen as him being undecided, not being fully convinced, whereas maybe he was doing the right thing, just being 100%.
Well, I didn't think it was a penalty myself. Now, everybody has different ideas on it, but the penalty when it's a handball has to be intentional, right? So the ball comes over from a corner kick with a good bit of pace on it. The fella in front misses it, and in my opinion, it hit his hand, right? Now, what happens with the VAR in that? They show that in slow motion. Now, when you see something in slow motion, it always looks like it was intended. It has to, because it's in slow motion. If the ball was coming over with the player at that pace, he would have got out of the way of it. But he didn't have time to get out of the way of it. Right? So when you show it then in quick time, or then in slow time, it looks like he did put his hand to the ball. Everything does. So, but it has to be intentional. I can't see him when the ball's coming over that quickly. You've got to put your hand somewhere. It hits him on the hand. And obviously, if you're moving the hand in a certain way, it looks like you've it's hand to ball. But why would he handle the ball in that particular situation? There was no danger on it in that. But that was VAR. But I think they can improve. I think they will improve VAR as they go on, which is a different subject. So, but to get back to what we were talking about before, whatever was going one way or the other, it definitely went for France. Definitely. And Croatia, see, once the first goal goes in, like it's a different game altogether. And then the second goal goes in. You know what I mean? Like at a time when they had most of the ball, Croatia. But when we were talking before the match, actually, if they match them in midfield, they do have more talent up front, Spain, to do it. And I think that was the case. To be fair to them, that was the case as well. Because they scored 2 good goals after that. But definitely, whatever was going, went France's way.
Right, so France are the world champions. We might get into some of the awards then and who you're going to hand them out to. And I guess let's start with the French and best manager. Does it have to be Didier Deschamps when his team wins?
Well, I think no, I didn't fancy Deschamps before the match, before the tournament started. I thought he didn't do such a great job with France in the Euros and that. But I think he did a really good job here. He got Pogba playing for a start, which was a big help. And generally speaking, as the tournament went on, I think France got better and stronger. So you'd have to say, and they went on to win it, and win it well in the finish. And they had some hard matches along the way, Nathan. So, yeah, I would, if you win it, you must be doing something right. So I think he did a lot right and would definitely deserve to be best manager.
And showed the importance of having a game plan, and it seemed he was very sure of what he wanted from his team. You look at the 2 full-backs he played, Pavard on the right and Hernandez on the left, 2 guys who generally play as centre-halves. Whereas he had Sidibe and Mendy, who would bomb forward, who I'm sure the French public would love to have seen and would have taken them to another level attacking-wise, but actually was confident enough in himself to mould them into a team that would win rather than a team that maybe would play.
Well, that's what good managers do, Nathan. You know what I mean? They look at a situation, they might think, well, he's a better individual player, but for the balance of the team, that's the way to do it. And in other words, he's picking what he considers to be his best players in that position. That's what good managers do. Bad managers do the opposite thing around. They make stupid mistakes, and there was quite a bit of that made along the way. I think Martinez, for example, made a few terrible mistakes in the team that he had against Brazil. Do you remember he let the 3 lads go, free up front? They got away with it against Brazil. Didn't do the same against France, but he did something as bad. Because there's an old saying in football, pick your best players in the best position. Well, there's no doubt that De Bruyne was the best midfield player of his type in the Premiership last year, right? Against Brazil and against France. He didn't play in that position. He just didn't play in that position. So you weren't getting the best out of De Bruyne from what he did that you know he can do. Actually, in against France, he played Flamini and Dembele in the middle of the field, who hadn't played in the early matches like that, and left De Bruyne in some position. I don't know what position he put him in, but he certainly didn't put him in the position that he played for Manchester City. So I don't think he did a good job at all. But if we're talking about the worst manager,
go on. Is it Roberto Martinez?
No, I'd say the Argentinian manager. I'm talking about Sampaoli. Is that whatever his name? Sampaoli. He was definitely the worst. I mean, he was a disaster. I think before they kicked the ball with the players, they had no confidence in him whatsoever. They got a hiding against Croatia, and he was, although he stayed on the bench, there was no doubt, and it was in the papers and everything, that the players were picking the team. You can't have that, Nathan.
Also, he was like a lunatic on the touchline, marching up and down, wasn't able to control his emotions on the sideline, which in times of need, which Argentina were, you can't imagine is the best way forward.
No, well, some managers do go a bit mad on the touchline, like Klopp does for Manchester City, but he gets a grip of the team in the dressing room. I think this fellow was going mad on the touchline and going even madder in the dressing room. So it just made a total...
no control anywhere.
No control anywhere. So he was a disaster. Absolute disaster.
And it's hard to know what the dynamic in that dressing room was as to how much control Messi had or should have or didn't have. And we look at Messi in such an idealistic way that for some reason, if it was Ronaldo acting like that, we'd probably be outraged. But with Messi, you think, guys, dead right to try and take control of this situation. But if you're the manager of Argentina, is the job simple? Put together an 11 that somehow gets the best out of Messi?
Well, you see, a manager has to be in control of everything. The manager is the most important person to the lot, Nathan. You can have great players, but doesn't play them in the right position, doesn't tell them to, and he loses them in that. So the manager is the most important person of that. He has to control everybody. Good lads, bad lads, whatever it means. Whatever goes on the pitch, he is responsible for. If they're not doing what they're told, then they shouldn't be on the pitch. So he was just a bad manager. And I think the situation was forced upon Messi to do what he had to do. I think Messi has played for other managers and you never got any trouble for him at all because they're good managers. So there comes to the stage where he's the leading player. This fella's a mess in the dressing room. Who's going to lead it? Who's going to say something? It wasn't because Messi wanted to do it. No way whatsoever. He was forced into this particular position, which was totally wrong. You know, and because the manager's everything, you go back to Spain a little bit, you know, their manager was new, coming in 2 days into the job. We don't know what happened in that dressing room. You know, we just don't know. But certainly the manager that had led him to the thing and hadn't been beaten in 20 matches was gone. And you have to have a leader. Because I know from playing myself with football, a lot of footballers in the dressing room be strong charactered lads. They'd all have different ideas of the way it should be done. You know, they'd all have different...
You need the continuity.
Well, you need the manager. You know, like, go back to Brian Clough. I didn't get on with Brian Clough. But that's why he was a great manager. He stood no nonsense, any nonsense, from anybody. He was superior to them all because they would have had characters in their dressing room if it came to the crunch, especially, say, centre-halves. Big Jack in our dressing room. Big Jack wouldn't want anybody going forward. The goalkeeper would want 10 players in the wall. You know what I mean? There's a lot of selfishness in it.
Everyone wants to protect themselves.
Yeah, but everybody's protecting themselves. Like, so Jack would say, you two are going too far forwards, me and Bremner. That was to protect him. Whereas Don Revie would say, no, Jack, that's what they're doing. I want them to do that. You do whatever you have to do. But if Don say it stopped, which he did stop, then and left it to the players, there'd be murders in the dressing room. Murders. Same with Spain. I think there was murders in Spain's dressing room. You had, you know, the centre halves.
Ramos and Piqué.
Might have been strong characters. We don't know who's the strong characters there. But I've never played in a team, Aidan, where everybody agreed on everything. Very much the opposite to that, where the manager had to say, OK, I told you with Don used to have a meeting when we'd lost a couple of matches. Big Jack, the first thing he'd say, those two fellas are going forward. Those two so-and-sos are going too far forward. But then everyone Don would say, OK, Jack, when you get the ball, you give it to these two. I'll do it because you're telling me to do it. But he was told to do it. And everybody has to be told. I mean, Don Revie was telling me things that sometimes I didn't like. But he's the manager.
Yeah.
And they have to be strong.
Be open to ideas, but ultimately have a clear message at the end and something
definitely.
You believe in yourself.
But that's why Messi would go in the dressing room, say at half-time when they were getting beat. I said it was murders in the dressing room. Everybody would be screaming. There'd be nobody in charge of it. Nobody, because this manager wasn't doing it. And then Messi, I'd say, because he was the most experienced player, would end up in having more control than he would ever want to do it. And that's what's called bad management. I said that's why France, what they did, they obviously seemed to be steady along the way. Got the best out of Pogba and all the various things that need to be done.
Well, I don't
think Brazil were managed well.
I don't know if you've seen the video of the French dressing room at half-time that's been released over the last couple of days where they showed an unbelievably calm scene in the French dressing room where the players are all seated and Didier Deschamps is making 4 or 5 very straightforward points, one of which was get the ball forward as quick as we can to Mbappe. Yeah. And there was no panic. We've worked our... This was recorded live. We've worked our way forward for years to get to this moment. We know what we're about. We know that they're going to come at us physically. Just keep our heads. We know we will win this if we go according to our plan.
Well, that's management. And that's leadership. Right? If he wasn't that type... First of all, he wouldn't be in the final. But if you get a weak manager, in that dressing room, no matter what, you'd hear 6 or 7 voices. All with a different opinion. The goalkeeper, we haven't got enough players in the wall. The centre half of the forwards are going to. Everybody's self-interest in it. And that sounds a bit strange, but that's what happens. That's why you need a leader. Somebody to say to the likes of Big Jack, no, we're not doing that. This is what I want you to do. Right? Because nobody agrees with everything that the manager does. Never happens. That's why the manager says. Again, they go back to Cloughie. Cloughie was an arrogant individual, bad manners. But he controlled everybody. What are you on about? What are you talking about? You do as you're told. Like treat everybody like schoolboys, Now there's a time and a place.
Doesn't always work.
Doesn't always work, no. But that's what managers do. Like it's very hard to win big trophies without a strong manager. Anywhere, whether it be the Premiership or anything. These managers have to dominate everybody in it.
Just briefly before we leave the manager side of it, then it fell very flat in the end for England and for Gareth Southgate with the way they exited the tournament to Croatia and then losing the 3rd and 4th place playoff. But they're talking about longevity for once. There hasn't been this absolute panic and a change in manager. And you look at Didier Deschamps, who's been in that job for 6 years. Yeah. Jogi Löw, the Germany manager, had been in the German job for a similar length of time. That level of continuity, is there enough from what you've seen from England to suggest that actually for once the future may be brighter, that they can go on from here?
Well, I think it's a lot brighter than it has been in the previous competitions that went down, because they were total disasters. I wouldn't be too sure about it, Nathan, because you're talking about, this is a young team. They're not that young, actually. And in 2 years' time is a lifetime in football. Lifetime in football. And certainly 4 years for the next World. This team is going to get stronger. We'll wait and see, right? My take on it is that I think he did a very, very good job off the field. Expectations were lower than they normally are going into the club. I think he did that in a really good way. I don't think he did such a good job on the pitch, to be quite honest. If you go back to the start, I didn't believe that with one designated midfield player that was going to do it. And actually what happened, the first test they got, the real first test they got, and you'd have to say, from looking from the outside, like to get the draw they did, you couldn't dream of it. You just couldn't dream of it. And I've nothing against England, but this is a fact. You know, Panama, Tunisia in the first round, didn't have to play Belgium, go into the second leg, they win on penalties against, and then they get Denmark. Sweden.
Sweden in the quarterfinals.
Quarterfinals. You know, they're one of the worst teams in it. And the way the draw fell, and then they get Croatia in the semi. Now, Croatia deserved to beat them, but it was the first test they had. So I think what's going to happen now with Southgate will come under more pressure now, because he reduced the pressure going into the World Cup. Now that they come out of the World Cup, this team is going to get better. They're young, they're going to do this, they're going to do that and the other. I wouldn't be too sure about that. And the pressure's on them now, because they're talking about 2 years' time. And going into a young team, this is a young team going in, they're players. And in football, 21, 22, 23, 24, is not young.
Yeah. And who knows, a couple of injuries. He'd all his main players fully fit for this tournament.
Exactly.
Things change quickly.
It's in the future, and they did okay for what they had. They did okay. You got to look at the draw. Now they've got to go on. But I'd be very sceptical about this team improving the way they're talking about it, to be quite honest.
I know you've really enjoyed watching the World Cup for the last month, but a couple of disappointments. What was the biggest disappointment? Oh,
well, the disappointment in the tournament was definitely Germany getting knocked out the way they were from a team aspect. I mean, they had a nightmare of it. Spain didn't do so well. Brazil didn't do as well as they could have done. Portugal, and a lot of big teams went out, as we know. But I think Spain was the most humiliating. The biggest disappointment player-wise was Neymar. Without any question. I mean, this guy was going in to be the next World Cup star. And he was, in my opinion, a social media man. His behaviour in the tournament was dreadful. He didn't play very well. His behaviour with diving and going all over the place was disgraceful in many ways. So instead of coming out of this particular competition as the next Messi or the next Ronaldo or the next Pele, whatever it might be, he failed miserably in that way.
And he's not a kid either. He's going to be 30 by the time the next World Cup comes around in Qatar in 2022. And maybe it's hindsight, and we know that there were criticisms of Ronaldo in particular when he was younger. But you talk to and you hear from Ronaldo's teammates, even when he was at Manchester United, and they all admired his work ethic, and that Ronaldo seemed to realise at a young age, and Messi, that I can win all the individual awards, but I'm not going to win Champions League or league titles unless I have a team around me. Whereas everything you seem to hear from Neymar, Paris Saint-Germain, and even since that Mbappe may have to leave because of Neymar's demands, there was no sense of Neymar being a leader of this Brazilian team, of what was really a really talented Brazilian team, that if he had brought them all together, rather than it was, well, I'm going to be the hero if we win this World Cup.
Yeah, well, the way you bring the team together, Nathan, is to go out and perform to the best of your abilities. He didn't do that. I think he was too wrapped up with being a star, getting the social media, having the haircut and all the various affectations, I would say. Whereas when Messi played and Pele and Ronaldo in a different way, Ronaldo's thing was always quite selfish in his own way in what he did. But ultimately, the team benefited from what he did. He didn't behave like Neymar in any way. I mean, he was a pro. He worked hard at his game and all the various things that he did. Messi was the ideal man in terms of team. Messi wasn't worried about his haircut. Get the reputation of being a leader on the field and doing it in a professional way. Now, you could see from the first match, Anyway, when Brazil played, I remember the first time Neymar touched the ball, he got on the ball, there was a couple of players around him, and there was a simple pass on to one of his colleagues, 10 or 12 yards away. He didn't give it to him. He tried to foot over the ball, a trick and that. In other words, from the start, he was going to, his thing to me was, I'm going to be the star here. I'm not going to be the best player. I'm going to be the star. So there's a big difference. So the way you become the real star is to be the best player. And he didn't do that. And he was the one, in my opinion, should be taken over from Ronaldo and Messi as one of the young, he's not young as you say, but as the next one of those particular players. And he failed miserably and didn't help Brazil along the way. Now, I don't think the manager helped him as well very much, but he certainly didn't do his stuff. And it was very, very disappointing.
All right, that is biggest disappointment of the World Cup. Want to talk about goal of the tournament, because there were some great goals from Cristiano Ronaldo's free kick in the final moments against Spain right at the start of the tournament. Lionel Messi's goal against Nigeria, which you said at the time you felt was one of the greatest goals you'd ever seen because of the quickness of the way he was able to think his way through the situation. You had Belgium scoring in the final minute. You had Nacho earlier before Ronaldo's goal for Spain against Portugal. What's the one you've gone for?
I've gone for Pavard, is that his name?
That's it.
From France against Argentina. And I think it was a beautifully technical goal in the way that it hit the ball at a very important time.
So it had both brilliance and context.
Yes. I think Messi scored, which was a great goal, and it was important at the time, but it wasn't a goal that was going on to win the World Cup. Indeed, Ronaldo's wasn't, which was one of the great goals. But you have to look at the importance of the goal, and this was a hugely important match. When they were up against it, they weren't playing particularly well, and really shut Argentina out of the game altogether. And I think from that time on, they actually got better, which happens in competition. You score a really good goal in an important match, the team grows from there, Nathan. I think this goal had that importance about it. It
wasn't that dissimilar to another goal scored by a fullback, the goal scored by Nacho against Portugal. Technically, how hard is it? So this was the volley on the edge of the area that he seems to cut across the ball. It spins beautifully. The camera angle is perfect behind it into the top corner. Technically, how difficult a skill is that?
Well, it's not easy, because there's one way of doing it right, and there's a million ways of doing it wrong. Because not only are you hitting it on the volley, you're hitting across the ball to get that swerve on it, which is just going inside the post. I mean, you couldn't have hit it better if you tried it 100 times after that. But it was at an important time of the match. He hit it well, and they went on to beat Argentina, as we know, and went on to win the World Cup.
Let's talk our player of the tournament then. And I'm excited, John, because I can see what's coming. The way you're talking about Paul Pogba, we're going to have the ultimate flip. You're going to ignore Kante, you're going to ignore Modric, and you're going to say Paul Pogba was the best player in this tournament.
No,
right?
No.
Go on, John, do it.
You couldn't be more wrong there, Nathan, actually. I think Pogba did well in the couple of matches, but Modric, from start to finish, led a team that weren't fancied, and showed. I think we spoke about this before. I think he's been the best player in his position for the last 5 years. The last great player in his position was Pirlo, who was doing it. What was about 5 years ago now, Nathan? I think this guy took up. Actually, he's the only one in the world doing it. I think De Bruyne has a chance of doing it if he matures with City and is allowed to play in the same position for Belgium. But Modric has been doing it for at least 5 years now. Actually started with Spurs. He was doing it then, and he's got better and better, as players of his type do. Get better and better. I think he's 32 now, and he's probably at the peak of his career. He's got that experience behind him, where to go on the pitch, don't waste a step, do all the various things that this great player, pick out the right pass, play for the team, all the various things that great players do. And he did it in this particular competition. I mean, he's not playing in a great team, Nathan.
Well, there's one thing, and you can look at the success he's had at club level in winning 4 of the last 5 Champions League titles. But he's playing in a brilliant Real Madrid side, where there's always an outball. Now, he had Rakitic alongside him, he had Mandzukic as an option. But to be able to play the exact same game and show the same level of bravery with those players around him.
Lesser players. In other words, he's risen above the players around him. It's more difficult to rise above the players in Madrid because they had so many good players. So it makes it even more it makes it even better for Modric to do what he did in the team that he did. He's leading them. He's playing in it. He's getting on the ball, taking responsibility. I mean, the great thing about him in showed his responsibility, a sense of responsibility to the team, was the time he missed a penalty in the normal time.
And stepped up in penalty shootout.
That's nerve-wracking. That's really nerve-wracking. I've already missed one. Now I'm going into the shootout. But he was first up. If you notice in that, Nathan, after me, he was the first up to on taking one on that. And thank goodness for him and for everybody, particularly him, he scored from it, which, it takes over from the penalty that he actually missed. But he's a great lad, because everything that you see about Modric playing is for the team. I've never seen him showing off. I've never seen him being big-headed. I've never seen him being big-headed in any way. And that's why he would have the admiration of his colleagues, and not just the adoration, he would have the respect and affection from players. There have been certain players that we know of who were great players, but their own colleagues didn't like them. No affection. So, and obviously you better have the respect and the affection, but there's nothing better than having both. And I say the players in the team playing for Croatia would be delighted for him to get the recognition. I don't think they would be jealous of him or envious of him. I'd say they would say, because he did the best for them. He didn't do the best for himself. And they would say, good luck to him. We're delighted for him.
Both himself and Pirlo were brilliantly talented players throughout their career. It feels as though it wasn't until they entered the later stages, though, that they were truly appreciated for what they could do. And I wonder with De Bruyne whether he's going to have to enter that stage of his career, because as we saw with Belgium, he threw him out in the right wing at times because he can be so dangerous in an attacking position, but can't control a game there. That's more a mental thing for De Bruyne, whether he has it in him to sacrifice.
Well, to be fair to him, he didn't make that decision. That was a bad, really, again, going back to what I said earlier, that was a really bad decision for the manager, because now he's playing him out of position. But what happens in Modric's case and De Bruyne, actually, the older you get, the better you should get, because you learn from match to match to match to match. Don't go into that position, you go into that position where you become a master player in that. And 32 is usually the age that you do it. Like when he was at Spurs, he was, 25, 26?
It's a decade ago now, nearly so.
Is it that long? So he was only 22 at that stage. Well, those great players are not great players at 22. They're very promising players, but they're learning. See, what happens in football, what should happen, Nathan, you should learn something from every match you play. So therefore, the more matches you play, the more you should learn. So when you get to 30 or 32, you've played in a lot of matches that you've learned from. Now you're at the master class. And that's what Modric is at now. Now it's a question of how long can he keep his fitness. And the way he plays, you get the stage that he won't waste a step. Right? Like when you're younger, you go for a run up the right wing, for example, and Modric in his position. You do a few of that and a few up the left wing. And then he'd realize, no, that's not the way to do it. I'm going to stop that. So every step you take means something, right? So the older you get, actually, the less running you'll do, but more effective you become. That's what makes the great players. But they have to have the mentality to learn from every match, to look back on every match and say, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have done that. It's like there's an old thing in football, and I said it before, you get players who play for 10 years and have 1 year's experience. And then you get a player who plays for 1 year, has 10 years experience. In other words, he's learning the game. And there's no game. That's why Modric has become one of the master midfield players, because he knows exactly what he's doing in any given time.
John, brilliant stuff. We do, of course, live in an age where everything is the best thing ever. So we're revelling in this World Cup, saying maybe it was one of the greatest World Cups of all time. You've seen a few. Where does it rank?
Well, it was one of the most enjoyable, Nathan. There's no doubt about that. Unfortunately, we lost what we regard as the big teams. Spain and Portugal, Germany, and that. But it was very enjoyable, despite the fact that they went out of it. Yes. The lesser countries, or we call them lesser countries, stepped up to the mark and made it very enjoyable, very exciting. The best team won, and Modric and his Croatia team did themselves proud, and everybody else proud for that matter.
John, great stuff as always. Thanks a lot for joining us in studio over the course of the World Cup. We'll talk to you again very soon. Enjoy your summer. There's only about 3 weeks to go until the Community Shield. Anyways, it never fully ends. We'll take a quick break, and then we're back looking at the Battle of Omagh.